Bob rings a call center and complains about his internet. Bob, my internet is not working properly. Officer, okay, double-click on my computer. Bob, I can't see your computer. Officer, no, click on my computer on your computer. Bob, how can I click on your computer from my computer? Officer, listen, there is an icon labeled My Computer on your computer. Okay, double-click on it. Bob, what the hell? What is your computer doing on my computer? Officer, double-click on your computer. Bob, on which icon I've to click? Officer, my computer. Bob, oh you fool. Tell me where is your office. I'll come there and click on your computer. An 80-year-old woman stood in court, facing the judge after being caught shoplifting a can of peaches. The judge leaned forward and asked, "Ma'am, can you tell me why you stole the peaches?" The elderly woman looked down, her voice trembling as she replied, "Your Honor, my husband and I are struggling. We don't have any money, and I was very hungry." The judge nodded, showing a hint of sympathy. "How many peaches were in the can?" he asked. "6, she said quietly. The judge sighed and declared, "In that case, I'm sentencing you to 1 day in jail for each peach. 6 days in total." Before the judge could finalize the sentence, the woman's husband suddenly stood up from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said, raising his hand, "if it helps, I feel I should let you know. Last week, she also stole a can of peas." One day, a professor was talking about marriage in the class. "Professor, what kind of wife would you like, Bob?" "Bob, I would want a wife like the moon." "Professor, wow, what a choice. So you want her to be cool and calm like the moon?" "Bob, no. Professor, oh, so you want her to be round and white?" "Bob, no. Professor, oh, so you want her to be fair and beautiful like the moon?" "Bob, no. I want her to be exactly like the moon. Just arrive at night and disappear in the morning." Professor fainted. Bob met up with his close friend Bunty and told him that he had just met the girl of his dreams. He asked Bunty for advice on how he should proceed. The wise and experienced man of the world, Bunty said, "Well, send her roses. And on the name card, invite her for a home-cooked meal." Bob liked the idea, so he followed Bunty's advice and invited the woman. Next day, after the dinner, Bunty called Papu and asked him, how did the home-cooked dinner go? Bob cried, "It was a complete flop." Bunty asked, "Why? Didn't the girl come to your house?" Bob replied, "She came, but she refused to cook and left angrily." A kind-hearted motorist saw a man struggling to change a tire alongside the highway and pulled over to see whether he could help. The man had a very red face and a dark smear across it where he'd wiped off sweat with dirty hands. His tie was undone and his shirt collar askew, and it was clear he had also wiped his hands on his once white shirt. Close to him stood an immaculately neat woman who was speaking in quick, agitated tones. "Hello there," said the motorist. "Say, I changed a lot of tires. Maybe I can help here." "You sure can," the man with the flat tire replied wearily. "My wife is an expert too. If you will just do all the arguing with her about how this tire ought to be changed, I will concentrate on the dirty work and get the job done." At a local park, I saw an elderly man sitting on a bench, basking in the sun. Curious, I walked up to him and asked, "Uncle, you've lived for 80 years. In your experience, Who has ruled the best? The old man groaned a little, placing his hands on his knees as he slowly stood up. With a sly smile, he said, "Son, it was your aunt." A husband, relaxing in the living room, decided to text his wife in the bedroom. "Are the kids asleep yet? Should I come over?" he typed, thinking he was being subtle. Moments later, his phone buzzed with a reply. Excited, he opened the message only to freeze mid-smile. The text read, "I'm playing a game on Mom's phone. Papa, Mama is already asleep." Bob failed in the final law exam and decided to make a deal with the professor. "Bob, sir, can I ask you one question?" Professor, "Yes." Bob, "If you can answer this question, I will accept my final marks. If you can't, you will have to give me an A grading." Professor agreed. Bob asked, "What is legal but not logical, logical but not legal, and neither legal nor logical?" Even after some long and hard consideration, the professor cannot give the student an answer, and therefore changes his exam mark into an A, as agreed. The following day, Professor asked same question to his students. He was shocked when all of them raised their hands. He asked one student. He answered, "Sir, you are 65, married to a 28-year-old woman. This is legal but not logical. Your wife is having an affair with a 23-year-old boy. This is logical but not legal. Your wife's boyfriend has failed in his exam, and yet you have given him an A. This is neither logical nor legal." Teacher, "Papu, please tell me, what is India Gate?" Papu, "Sir, India Gate is fine quality basmati rice." Teacher, "What is Charminar?" Papu, "Charminar is a very popular cigarette in India, and due to its low cost, it is easily affordable." Teacher, "What is Taj Mahal?" Papu, "Taj Mahal is packet of tea leaves." Teacher, "Rascal, how dare you give such bullshit answers? You are spoiling the name of national treasures. If you want me to allow you in the classroom tomorrow, don't forget to come with your father's signature." Papu, "Okay, sir. Next day." Teacher, looking at the table. Papu, "You idiot! How dare you bring whiskey bottle inside the classroom?" Papu, "Sorry, sir, but you only told me to bring my father's signature today. I simply obeyed your order." Now again you are shouting. This is not fair, sir. A middle-aged woman seemed sheepish as she visited her gynecologist. "Come now," coaxed the doctor. "You've been seeing me for years. There's nothing you can't tell me." "This one's kinda strange," the woman said. "Let me be the judge of that," the doctor replied. "Well," she said, "yesterday I went to the bathroom in the morning and heard a plink, plink, plink in the toilet. When I looked down, the water was full of pennies." "I see," commented the doctor calmly. "That afternoon, I went to the bathroom again and plink, plink, plink. There were 5p pieces in the bowl," the woman continued. "That night," she went on, "I went again and plink, plink, plink. There were 50 PS. This morning, there were £1 coins. You've got to tell me what's wrong with me," she implored. "I'm scared out of my wits." The gynecologist put a comforting hand on her shoulder. There, it's nothing to be scared about," he said. "You're simply going through the change." Teacher, "If I gave you 2 rabbits and another 2 rabbits and another 2, how many will you have?" Bob, 7, sir. Teacher, "No, listen carefully. If I gave you 2 rabbits and another 2 rabbits and another 2, how many will you have?" Bob, 7. Teacher, Let me put it to you differently. If I gave you 2 apples and another 2, how many will you have? Bob: 6. Teacher: good. Now if I gave you 2 rabbits and another 2 rabbits and another 2, how many will you have? Bob: 7. Teacher: where do you get 7 from? Bob: because I've already got 1 at home. An elderly couple was settling into bed after a long day when the old man suddenly let out a loud belch and chuckled. That's 3 points for me. His wife, intrigued, turned to him and asked, "What do you mean?" With a playful grin, he replied, "It's burp basketball." Not wanting to miss out on the fun, she waited a moment before letting out a hefty burp of her own and declared, "And that's a slam dunk. We're tied." After a brief silence, the old man responded with another impressive burp, announcing, 4-3, I'm in the lead. Determined to keep the game close, his wife followed suit with another loud burp and laughed. Another dunk, tie game. She then added a smaller burp. And a free throw. I'm ahead, 7-4. Feeling the competitive spirit rise, the old man knew he had to up his game to assist. He took a deep breath, preparing to unleash his best shot, but miscalculated and let out an unexpected squeak. His wife raised an eyebrow and asked, "What was that?" With a sheepish smile, the old man sighed, "Looks like I just hit a technical foul. Time for a change of game." Papu is 33 years old and still single. One day, a friend asked, "Why aren't you married? Can't you find a woman who will be a good wife?" Papu replied, "Actually, I've found many women I wanted to marry, but when I bring them home to meet my parents, my mother doesn't like them." His friend thinks for a moment and says, "I've got the perfect solution. Just find a girl who's just like your mother." A few months later, they meet again, and his friend says, "Did you find the perfect girl? Did your mother like her?" With a frown on his face, Papu answers, "Yes, I found a perfect girl. She was just like my mother. You were right. My mother liked her very much." The friend said, "Then what's the problem?" Papu replied, "Now my father doesn't like her." Two widows, Margaret and Ruth, were chatting in their retirement home. Margaret: "That charming Frank Peterson asked me out for a date. I know you went out with him last week, and I wanted to get your thoughts before I give him my answer." Ruth: "Oh, let me tell you. He arrived right on time at 7 p.m, looking quite dapper in a sharp suit, and he brought me the most beautiful bouquet of flowers. Then he took me downstairs." Margaret: "What was waiting for you?" Ruth: "A limousine, complete with a uniformed chauffeur." Ruth continued, "We went out for dinner. An incredible feast. Lobster, champagne, dessert, and even after-dinner drinks. Honestly, Margaret, I enjoyed it so much, I thought I might just float away with joy." Margaret leaned in, intrigued. "And then," Ruth said with a grin, "then we returned to my apartment for a nightcap, and let me tell you, he turned into a wild man. He completely lost control, tore off my brand new dress, and let's just say we had quite the adventurous night. 3 times, in fact." Margaret gasped, "Oh my goodness! So you're saying I shouldn't go out with him?" Ruth laughed. No, no. I'm just suggesting you wear something old and inexpensive." A man is talking to his best friend about married life. "You know," he says, "I really trust my wife, and I think she has always been faithful to me. But there's always that doubt." His friend says, "Yeah, I know what you mean." A couple of weeks later, the man has to go out of town on business. Before he goes, he gets together with his friend. "While I'm away, could you do me a favor? Could you watch my house and see if there is anything fishy going on? I mean, I trust my wife, but there's always that doubt." The friend agrees to help out, and the man leaves town. 2 weeks later, he comes back and meets his friend. So did anything happen? I have some bad news for you, says the friend. The day after you left, I saw a strange car pull up in front of your house. The horn honked, and your wife ran out and got into the car, and they drove away. Later, after dark, the car came back. I saw your wife and a strange man get out. They went into the house, and I saw a light go on. So I ran over and looked in the window. Your wife was kissing the man. Then he took off his shirt. Then she took off her top. Then they turned off the light. Then what happened? Says the man. I don't know. It was too dark to see. You see what I mean? There's always that doubt. As I stepped out of the shower, the faint sound of clattering dishes echoed from downstairs. My heart skipped a beat. My wife was supposed to be out. Without thinking, I snatched my old family rifle from 1903 off the wall, even though it hadn't worked in years, and tiptoed down the stairs. It wasn't until I reached the bottom that I remembered I was completely naked. Peering around the corner, rifle at the ready, I braced myself. But instead of an intruder, I found my wife casually loading the dishwasher. She glanced at me, eyebrow raised. What are you doing? I thought I heard someone. Came down to scare them off, I replied, feeling a little foolish. Her eyes slowly swept over my bare, pudgy frame, and she let out a quiet chuckle. You didn't need the gun for that. One sunny afternoon, Dolly and Ruby, two long-time friends, sat together in a cozy cafe, sipping their tea and chatting about their favourite topic, grandchildren. Dolly sighed, shaking her head. You know, every year I send each of my grandchildren a card for their birthday. Inside, I always put a very generous check. But you know what? I never hear from them. No calls, no texts, no thank you notes, nothing. Ruby, her eyes twinkling mischievously, nodded. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I send my grandchildren generous checks too, every year. Dolly looked surprised. Really? Do you hear back from them? Of course, Ruby replied with a grin. Within a week, I get phone calls, messages, and even personal visits. They come right to my door, all smiles and politeness. Dolly leaned forward, intrigued. Wow, how on earth do you manage that? Ruby chuckled softly and leaned in closer. Oh, it's easy, she said. I just don't sign the check. Dolly's eyes widened, and then she burst into laughter, realizing her friend's clever trick. Sometimes a little strategy goes a long way. Once upon a time, a man was fed up. Every day he dragged himself to work for 8 grueling hours while his wife stayed home doing whatever it was she did. One evening, he couldn't take it anymore and decided to have a little chat with the big guy upstairs. Dear Lord, he prayed, I work hard all day while my wife stays home. I want her to know what I go through. Please, just for one day, switch our bodies so she can see how tough my life is. Now God, being all-knowing and having a wicked sense of humour, decided to grant the man's wish. The next morning, the man woke up as a woman. He blinked at his reflection in the mirror, shrugged and thought, how hard could this be? Spoiler, it was hard. By 6 a.m. he was cooking breakfast while dodging flying cereal bowls. He wrestled the kids out of bed like a WWE champion, dressed them, which somehow involved tying 27 shoelaces, and packed their lunches. After dropping them at school, he swung by the dry cleaners, wrestled a cart through the grocery store, and speed cleaned the house like a caffeinated Roomba. By 1 p.m., he was knee-deep in laundry, covered in dog hair from bathing the dog, and trying to figure out how a single cat could poop so much. He barely had time to breathe before it was time to pick up the kids. Cue chaos. Homework arguments, snack negotiations, and a full-blown meltdown over mismatched socks. He ironed while watching Judge Judy, peeled potatoes like he was defusing a bomb, and breaded pork chops while dreaming of his old desk job. Dinner came and went in a flurry of dishes, crumbs and complaints about broccoli. Then it was bath time, bedtime stories, and tucking the kids in. By the time he crawled into bed, he was an exhausted wreck. And then, his wife, or rather, he, gave him that look. Seriously? He muttered. But he went through with it because he was a trooper. The next morning, completely wrecked, he knelt by the bed and begged, "Lord, I was so wrong. Please, I'll never complain again. Just switch us back." God, chuckling from above, replied, "Well, about that. You got pregnant last night, so, you're gonna need to ride this out for the next 9 months." And that's when the man realized God truly does work in mysterious and hilarious ways. One evening after dinner, my son rushed up to me, clearly worried. "Dad, something's wrong with one of my lizards. He's just lying there, looking sick. Can you help?" Trying to appear calm, I followed him into his room. Sure enough, one of his 2 lizards was lying on its back, looking unwell. Unsure of what I was seeing, I called for my wife. "Honey, come take a look at this." She entered the room and gasped. "Oh my goodness, I think she's having babies." My son was horrified. "What? But their names are Bert and Ernie." I was equally confused. "Wait, how is that possible?" "We agreed we didn't want them reproducing," I said, looking at my wife. She gave me a dry look. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about that?" "You were supposed to get 2 males, I reminded her. "Well, sometimes it's hard to tell," she shot back. By now, the rest of the family had gathered around to witness the spectacle. Trying to make the best of it, I turned to the kids. "All right, kids, we're about to witness something special. The miracle of life." The kids groaned in disgust. "Gross!" "What are we supposed to do with a bunch of baby lizards?" my wife asked, concerned. I peered closely at the lizard. It squirmed, and what looked like a tiny foot briefly appeared before disappearing again. "We're not getting very far here," I observed. "It's breach," my wife whispered in alarm. "Do something, Dad," my son urged. Nervously, I reached in to try and assist, but every time I gently pulled, the tiny foot slipped back in. "Should we call 911? my eldest daughter asked. "Maybe they can help?" "Let's get Ernie to the vet," I decided. We rushed to the vet, with my son holding the lizard's cage on his lap. "Hang in there, Ernie," he whispered. At the vet's office, the doctor examined Ernie closely. After a few moments, he turned to my wife and me with a calm expression. "Mr. and Mrs. Cameron, may I speak to you privately?" We followed him aside, and he smiled. "Ernie's perfectly fine. He's not in labour. In fact, Ernie is a young male. Sometimes, when they grow up, they act out a bit." We stared at him for a moment, understanding slowly dawning. "So Ernie wasn't sick, just, acting out?" my wife asked, trying not to laugh. "That's correct," the vet confirmed. My wife chuckled softly, but the more she thought about it, the harder it became for her to keep it together. Soon, she was laughing uncontrollably. "What's so funny?" I asked, already knowing what she found amusing. She gasped for breath between laughs. I just can't believe you were trying to help him like that." "That's enough," I muttered, feeling more than a little embarrassed. We thanked the vet and bundled Ernie back into the car. On the way home, my son, blissfully unaware, looked up at me. I'm sure Ernie's really grateful for what you did, Dad. Oh, you have no idea, my wife said, stifling another giggle. 2 lizards, $140. 1 cage, $50. Trip to the vet, $30. The memory of me trying to help the lizard. Priceless.